Sometime in the last quarter of 2023, I noticed a plant growing in one of my planter boxes. Something I definitely hadn't planted myself. I was curious about what it was, and so I just kind of let it grow, as I'm known to do, as I'm a fan of a very hands-off approach, parenting style with my babies. Plants are much older than human history, and I think they will grow just fine without too much of my input. And if they die, they die. Such is the hexagon of life. Anyway, this plant likely germinated from bird poop that was deposited into the planter soil some time back. In late December, I noticed this little white flower started blossoming, and I didn't think too much about it. I then took a few weeks break over December/January for the holidays and came back to a few green fruit pods. It was at this point that I realized I had a chili plant bebe growing in my garden. Fortunately, chili plants are self-pollinating, which means my one solitary bush is full of flowers that have both male and female organs, which means that one plant was able to self-fertilize and produce a bountiful harvest of chili fruit. It is now April, and I've been harvesting fruit every 3 days or so since January, and I finally have enough to make a fermented chili and plum hot sauce. Okay, let's get to cooking. First, we need to figure out how much fruit we have in gram weight. So the first thing I'm doing here is I'm going to quarter my rinsed plums and remove and chuck the stones in the middle. I don't want any of the seeds in this mixture at all. The fermenting bacteria naturally present in the fruit are what we'll be relying on for the fermentation process to happen. So you don't want to decimate the population of bacteria on your fruit, but you definitely want them to be clean. I have a basic fermented fruit and chili sauce recipe that needs 475 grams of fruit to 125 grams of chili for a total of 600 grams of produce. To this, we need to add about 5% of the 600 grams as salt. The salt will help kill off other microorganisms and bacteria that aren't healthy for us in the context of our fermentation and can ruin and spoil the sauce. Once you know how much fruit you have, you can now work out how much of everything else you will need. As it makes sense for me to make this in big batches, I am starting off with about 2,143 grams of red and yellow plums, which means I'm going to need 564 grams of my chilies. For the chili sauce, I'm using some habaneros that I got from a market and my garden foraged red chilies, which I think are bird's eye chili or serrano peppers. Combining the chili and the plums, we have a total of 2,707 grams of fresh produce. And 5% of this weight is going to be our salt, which we're going to add in and blend everything together until it's smooth and pureed. Next, we're going to transfer the sauce to clean glass bottles or plasticware, and I'm going to drape some cling film directly on top of the sauce. The bacteria we're counting on to ferment our goodies requires an anaerobic environment, as they have a bit of a choking fetish. The presence of oxygen will affect their ability to grow, and will also encourage the growth of contaminants like mold and aerobic bacteria, which is no bueno. As the bacteria ferment, they release gases, and this may force the cling film to rise up the container, which will then allow pockets of oxygen to enter our chili. And to fix this, we just put a little weight on top of the plastic wrap, and that will allow the gases to escape while preventing the introduction of excessive amounts of oxygen. Pop some lids on top of your jars and store them at room temperature in a dark cupboard. While the sauce ferments over the next few days, let's do some maths for our vinegar and brown sugar. 10% for the vinegar and 1.6% for the brown sugar. I always label my fermentation vessels with all the relevant information, like what has been added so far, what day the cook began, and when I expect the process to end. I like to ferment my chili sauces for 7 to 10 days or so, and every single day I check in on my little batch and stir and mix the sauce every morning, because the gases force the less dense skins and other solids to float above the liquid. We want our fermentation process to happen in a more homogeneous way, so that stirring once a day is enough to keep everything mixed and allow for a more efficient fermentation process. You can avoid this step of having to stir every day by fermenting your produce in bigger chunks and not in a smooth sauce like I did here. It's a matter of preference with different inconveniences and different kinds of chilies that come out at the end. Once I'm happy with the flavor in that 70-day window fermentation period, I will then blend 10% vinegar and 1.6% brown sugar into the chili sauce. The vinegar changes the pH, and this will make our sauce more shelf stable, as it will limit the further growth of bacteria, including our fermentation bacteria, but of course other contaminants as well. The vinegar also helps to mellow out the intensity of the chili, and the brown sugar adds some sweetness to the whole vibe. After blending, cooling, the chili is ready for bottling into some sterile bottles. You also have the option to filter the chili sauce before bottling it if you want a smoother consistency. I like a quite chunky chili sauce, so I don't really filter my chilies that often. For a special twist on the chili experience, you can add it to a mildly flavored ice cream. A really interesting thing happens where initially the milk protein, the fat, and the temperature of the ice cream limit your taste buds' ability to detect the spicy capsaicin molecule in chilies. But slowly and surely, as the ice cream melts off your tongue, the chili flavor presents itself. And this creates a perpetual cycle of calm relief as you take another spoon, and a fiery burn as the chili sauce presents itself at the very end of the taste. It's a really playful way to enjoy chilies. Pam Soroi.